Wouldn't it be nice to have several thought leaders in your industry know and love your brand? Start a podcast. Invite your industry's thought leaders to be guests on your show and start reaping the benefits of having a network full of industry influencers. Learn more at sweetfishmedia.com.
You're listening to B2B Growth, a daily podcast for B2B leaders. We've interviewed names you've probably heard before, like Gary Vaynerchuk and Simon Sinek, but you've probably never heard from the majority of our guests. That's because the bulk of our interviews aren't with professional speakers and authors. Most of our guests are in the trenches leading sales and marketing teams. They're implementing strategy. They're experimenting with tactics. They're building the fastest growing B2B companies in the world. My name is James Carberry. I'm the founder of Sweetfish Media, a podcast agency for B2B brands, and I'm also one of the co-hosts of this show. When we're not interviewing sales and marketing leaders, you'll hear stories from behind the scenes of our own business. We'll share the ups and downs of our journey as we attempt to take over the world. Just kidding. Well, maybe. Let's get into the show. Welcome back to B2B Growth. I'm your host for today's episode, Logan Lyles with Sweetfish Media. I'm joined today by Anand Thaker. He is the CEO of IntelliPhi, the co-host of the Talking Stack podcast. He is an all-around great guy, a martech investor, advisor, a mover and shaker in the marketing technology space. Anand, how you doing today, man?
Oh, I'm doing great, Logan. It's fantastic to reconnect with you on this episode. Thanks for inviting me, and certainly congratulations on surpassing your 1,000 episodes.
Oh, thank you so much, man. It has been quite a journey, and I am just excited to have you on the podcast because every time you and I talk or exchange emails, I feel like I get a lot out of it. Obviously, you have a lot of experience in the marketing technology space, and so to be able to have a chat with you that we get to share with listeners is definitely a pleasure. As I mentioned in introducing you, you've got a lot going on these days, as you typically do. So for listeners who aren't familiar with you, I think there'll probably be more who already do, but for folks who don't, and for folks who want to know what you're up to lately, give us a little bit of background and what you're up to these days, man.
Yeah, so I've been, so we recently had a huge chunk of our company, or pretty much almost everything except for me and the brand, acquired in a recent acquisition. We were, our platform, which does go-to-market decisioning for executives or growth leaders, was acquired by a top management consulting firm. Of course, all of that undisclosed and whatnot. So as eccentric as most entrepreneurs are, I was like, well, I want my brand back because I love the logo that I put together. So they didn't have a problem with that. And part of it was because the mission still continues. And I think what I've been really pushing on, and I think this is what I'll be once I return to a new normal, is really helping leaders growth leaders making these decisions and in these complex environments, not only in terms of marketing, but how marketing kind of expands into other areas and how that inspiration creates opportunity and how agility and understanding with the marketplace, the customer, and all that. So, our platform was designed to really incorporate both the human and, AI kind of components and obviously data. And I think that's where the evolution of leaders are going to have to leverage in order to make these smarter decisions, or at least avoid really bad ones. So that mission still continues. I really want to continue to pursue that no matter whatever I end up doing next. And it's for me, it's all about elevating leaders and to some degree enriching investors, and it's all really revolved around this decision making.
I love it, man. So you actually touched on something there that we're going to dive deeper into for today's topic, and that's the expansion of marketing beyond the department. As you look at, go to market, you touched on some things there. There's all sorts of angles to that, from investors to the marketing leaders to the founders, and then the other functional roles. So let's take that opportunity to dive right into this idea of expansion of marketing beyond the marketing department, whether you're a martech company yourself or not. I think we're all seeing this trend, and I would love for you to give us some perspective on why you think that is, that marketing either is just organically or it needs to expand beyond the marketing department.
So it really revolves around the customer experience that everyone is talking about, right? They want to have this. They want brands. You want brands to have this personalized experience, or at least make these customers and prospects feel like we understand them. And obviously, as a marketplace and as consumers or customers, we want people to be intelligent about how much they know about us rather than just simply using technology to, batch and blast or kind of shoot a bunch of things over. That's not really scaling if you're not making good relationships or increasing the relationships. And it's interesting because, I've been involved in the martech landscape or building that with Scott Brinker. If you're all familiar with that, if you've ever seen the eye chart of logos, this is the thing that I've been working on and with him, and I haven't had a chance to do it last year, do the acquisition process, but the inspiration about a lot of how to prove the fact that marketing is moving beyond the department, or why inspiration from marketing will spread across the organization, is we're seeing two dimensions to this. One, as I described, was the understanding of a customer, right? So I call this sort of the customer resolution. How well do you know them? Back in the day, let's say back in 2011, there were about 150 logos on that Scott Brinker martech landscape. Equate that to like a stick figure. That's about as much as you knew about somebody. And then now, we're at over 7,000, given, now in 2019. And so now we're more of that Black Panther view of understanding somebody, right? That resolution sort of, evolved into something. Now we're getting better and better. Now we have the data, but are we really utilizing it? So that's one dimension, is this customer resolution and the traditional reach. How far and how well do we know people? The other dimension is the cross-company collaboration, because customer experience doesn't start and end with marketing. It actually, goes beyond that. So I'm sure you've had a number of guests who spoke about marketing and sales alignment, right? There's the opportunity to generate more pipeline as a result of that. Then there's marketing and then closing on deals. There's marketing, sales, and now customer success has been starting to, make its inroads. And that problem came about when you can get, a lot of startups face this, where they'll put a lot of effort and energy into the growth, and then
right.
The customers just fall off. Right, churn is a big problem, but also for large companies or mid-sized companies, the same thing. Now, continue to think about let's expand beyond that. Right now, if marketing, sales, and customer success are in sync with each other, they probably have a better understanding of what are the needs of the product. How does the product need to go? The service need to grow? So this is where the product groups come into play, right? There are product marketing and product management groups, but why are they kind of put to the side and you're starting to throw, ideas and things over the wall to them? They need to be incorporated as part of the process, right? And then now, continue to expand that, right? Where do we hear where a lot of brands fall apart? It's a lot of times legal, maybe financial, it could be operations. So we're really starting to see a total customer experience integration across the entire organization. And a lot of that has been stemmed from what marketing has sort of stirred up as a result of that. So there's this interesting challenge of why marketing will continue to expand, but can it? And how does it do it? And is it equipped to even do that in the first place? But I think if we are all really truly focused on the customer and the customer experience, then somebody with level of marketing understanding will need to expand that mindset across the entire organization.
Yeah, I think you touched on a couple of things there that are really important, Anand. You talked about, especially in fast growth startups, because so many teams are leveraging a lot of tech out of that 7,000 member slide now that you and Scott have worked on. Growth, the barrier to entry is a lot lower once there's a great idea, but that means we're pushing a lot of people through that funnel and now interacting with other functions of the business more quickly. And so that alignment has to be there. You're absolutely right. We've talked about sales and marketing alignment a good bit on this show, but it goes further than that. It reminds me of something that my friend Ethan Butte over at BombBomb mentioned when we were kicking off the first episode of his show, the Customer Experience Podcast. And he mentioned a quote from Seth Godin where he said, if it's noticed, it's marketing. Well, if we're pushing a lot of people through the funnel and interacting with a lot of different functions, there's a lot to notice there, right? And And so that customer experience and the things that marketing is doing, because they are the first touch point, are noticed throughout, those other functional roles. So I think there are probably some lessons from marketing, or maybe some basic understanding of marketing, of messaging, that other roles could probably learn from marketing. Other functional areas could learn. What are some of those things that you think about as you think on alignment throughout the organization?
Yeah, one of the first things is the first struggles that marketing has had, and this is where the rest of the organization kind of gets some inspiration is, how do you prove your value to the organization? Aside from sales, who is closest to revenue, a lot of the other departments have difficulties, or disciplines have difficulties proving their value. But the best way they can prove their value is with their collaboration with other organizations. So we've already touched on that, right? That's one piece of it is, marketing and sales, how do they work together? Are they working together? Are they a single, are they operating in a single momentum or series of steps? How do these other groups do that? The second is, another one is about the data. And I know it's overspoken about it. I mean, trust me, I used to be in the energy and finance worlds, very data intensive, industries, and marketing is still catching up to those. But you're really democratizing this data. And I think this is where Tomas Tungs and Frank Bean, Looker, Tomas is over at Redpoint and Frank Bean is over at Looker. And, they wrote a book called Winning with Data. It's a great book and I highly recommend it. And they really talk about, not necessarily about the companies or the VC firm, but more about why data in the hands of more people can be valuable as long as you have some good training along with that. And so if more people have access to that information across the organization and they know how to use it, right? That's that second part that a lot of companies fall apart on. They'll create these dashboards and they'll create these portals, but they forget about, okay, well, how does this really relate to my job? Then you really have, people can really start to investigate and understand how to leverage that. And I think the other part that ends up being very important is signals, right? Really being able to understand what are the signals in the marketplace, what are signals in other parts of the organization. And this is where agility, and I know this is where Scott Brinker is particularly talking about, agile marketing, and many other folks are doing this. But the only way to be agile is understand what signals are in front of you. You really can't we don't have crystal balls, but we can see what might be coming our way. And this is one of the things where we really want to be able to take advantage of. And so, I guess if I were to sneak another one in there, it would be, really being able to have the opportunity to play, right? And I call it play, meaning do take the time and certainly as a leader, explore how do you help your team members explore things, whether it's in their discipline or not. And that inspiration can come in very handy. And you build some empathy, seeing other things or experiencing what other people are going through.
Today's growth story revolves around search engine marketing. Delphix, a big data platform, had hired an agency to manage their Google ads a few years ago, but they weren't seeing the results they wanted to see. Being such a technical B2B solution, they set out to find a team that could take on their challenge. After countless proposals, they found the perfect fit: Directive Consulting, the B2B search marketing agency. In just 1 week after launching Directive's campaigns, Delphix saw their lead volume double and their cost per lead drop by 60%. I have a hunch that Directive can get these kind of results for you too. So head over to directiveconsulting.com and request a totally free custom proposal. That's directiveconsulting.com. All right, let's get back to this interview.
Yeah. I think if you're going to ask other leaders within the organization to bring some marketing into their functional area, and you're going to be asking more of them, asking them to learn lessons from your functional area, then you've got to lead with some empathy. You've got to start there. What are some of the other leadership qualities you think are necessary, either in a marketing leader, in a sales leader, trying to bring in these other functional areas to really one, see that they do have a marketing aspect to what they're doing. They do have a closer tie to revenue than they might think. What are some of the things that either qualities in those leaders that can be effective in kind of rolling out that vision, or ways that they can go about interacting with those other functional leaders?
So I wrote this post. I'm hoping to expand on it. It's you can do a search on it, but it's 11 traits of highly effective growth leaders, and these are the 11 traits that I've been cataloging over the last, I guess, ever since I was like 14 and started trading on the market. But what are these people doing, whether they're leaders or emerging leaders, that helps them become bigger, more than they are, right? So one of the top ones is, no matter where you are in the organization, is to think like a CEO. You may not know all the nuances. You may not have a business degree. You may not know all this stuff. But if you are in a marketing role, or if you're in a sales role, maybe a customer success role, thinking like a CEO, understanding what they have to go through, whether it's a startup CEO and a founder, what's important to them as they continue to lead the organization and move that forward. And so, I know a lot of people say leaders should empathize with certainly their team, but I think there's also a reverse aspect of a mutual empathy back, where, hey, look, my team lead, or perhaps my co-founder or my CEO, has to go through these PR things. They have to go through talking with investors. They have to talk to legal when stuff when stuff hits the fan. That's certainly one aspect. Another is, they really go after substance. I know, like, we both marketing and startups and community and the influencer community space. You're part of this as well. You know how hard it is to just not chase the shiny object, but it's too hard not to do that in the first place, because clearly you'll feel there's that FOMO situation where you have this fear of missing out. But if they're finding ways that this really can be impactful to what they're doing, going bleeding edge or leading edge on the next thing, whatever it may be, is worthwhile. But you have to have a game plan to do it. You just really sometimes, especially in mid-sized, large organizations, they may not be as agile as a startup, but they have a lot more to risk. And there's certainly more to be, there's a lot of opportunity costs in terms of all the things you can do. So understanding how to do that. We talked about customer empathy, we talked about data. And another thing is, and I think a third thing, or a last thing that I probably would touch on is, they build this idea of, they prioritize on talent themselves, right? So if you're a leader, I think that Richard Branson, or Sir Branson, speaks of this. It's very contrary to a lot what we say or what we know about in the marketing space, or even the B2B space, where everyone's focused on the customer. He's like, I'm focused on my team. I'm focused on my, my people, the talent, because he realized a long time ago that if he treats the people in his organization well, and they feel empowered and they are enabled with the right tools, the customer experience will come. The opportunities will come, right? If you focus so much on the customer, then sometimes, and we see this all the time, there's this huge gap, this chasm between, let's say, I hate to pick on Taco Bell, but I do love Taco Bell. And yes, it is a sin of mine, but they have all this technology out there. But if your frontline folks aren't, actually, smiling or knowing how to handle situations or whatever, who cares about what advertising or what marketing or what creative new taco you built, or none of that matter. Like kiosks in the store, none of that will matter if you still don't have your people believing in, or certainly being empowered to help them. And so you see the best brands make that happen, right? T-Mobile does it. Nordstrom's has been notable for that. Southwest, people are allowed to be creative because they know that they are part of the experience. So that's one of the biggest ones, is prioritizing talent, but it's more than just hiring the right people. Everybody says that. It's really being able to empower them and having a game plan for them to feel like you're elevating their careers and they're part of building that experience with you. It's not just telling them what to do.
Yeah, absolutely. It's like, that quote or meme I've seen around LinkedIn and other places where the CFO says, what if we invest in our people and they leave? And the CEO says, what if we don't invest in them and they stay? Right.
Right.
That's a bigger risk. And I certainly agree with folks like you that see that, oftentimes in business. I mean, we say it all the time, but it's worth repeating, right? We have our priorities, which are, the bottom bottom line and or investors, the customers, and then the people on the team. But when you flip that over, as you're saying, you focus on the customer, your team, and then the bottom line, it flows much more naturally. It is a downhill stream as opposed to trying to push a boulder or push water up the hill. Let's make it seem even harder, which it truly is when you're going the opposite direction. Great example. I'll just admit real quick, Taco Bell is a guilty pleasure of mine from time to time. So just so you feel like you get a little company there. But back to the topic at hand. So let's talk about the other side of the coin before we wrap up on it. If we talk about expanding marketing into other functional roles, we've talked about what leaders can do to effectively negotiate that. What if we have other leaders or contributors to other functional groups listening to this, whether they're in sales, customer success, or other roles within the organization? What are some of the things that they can do to expand beyond their role that doesn't take them too far out of their specialty, but could be effective in this new, more organic structure that we see, rolling out throughout organizations?
Sure. So I'll give a shout out again back to Scott. He came up with this concept of a T-shaped, or individual. And the idea of this T-shaped, type of talent is someone who is, broadly aware of a lot of things, but it specializes in particular areas. So imagine that for a moment while we go into some of these particular options. The best case that I like to, I'll start with or use is, let's say you're in marketing. We talk about marketing and sales. Go make some cold calls. And if you're a marketer, go make some cold calls. I think you'll appreciate how much the cadence of a salesperson, the momentum, the agony, and how much like what you think you might be adding value to sales may not be as valuable as you might think, or there might be things that you could be doing, but you never realized that was the case. So really, sometimes doing the other person's job, even if there's a possibility to do that, even if it's a side project or doing it on your own time, would be incredibly valuable. Another thing to do as well is see if you can attend other people's meetings, not just the stand-ups, but more of the strategy meetings. Just sit there and listen to what's going on. And I think what you'll end up finding out is you still will learn more by doing, but at the same time, by being able to be in presence of, say, a product marketing or product strategy meeting, you'll get a sense of what is it that's going on. And I know you already have probably as an individual contributor, perhaps, or a specialist, you probably already have someone who's going to those meetings, but see if you can have your, leader have you accompany them, to that particular case. And then, summarize what you've learned and then share that with a few people and see if what you got out of that meeting or those series of meetings or workshops is, what other people think. And I think that's certainly another option. And then the last thing I think, the last option that I've seen that's been incredibly successful is literally stepping in the shoes of your customer. What ends up happening is there are certain companies, and I advise this on occasion, actually quite regularly. I'm sorry, not on occasion. On occasion, I get a lot of pushback, which is surprising to me. But if you're in a particular role, no matter what, like even if you're in legal, if you are in sales, actually go and use the product that you're trying. And if you can't do that, then sit down with a potential prospect that you might be close to or a customer and then watch what happens. So basically, it's kind of like you're an employee of Taco Bell and you go and you order a Taco Bell.
Yeah,
right? You
go order a taco.
Like, hey, yeah, go order a taco. Try the little kiosk. If you don't see too many people in line, you're probably going to forego the kiosk. Did it really help you, right? So, in the B2B world or the B2B capacity, sit in on trying to create a persona. You get to do a little acting. And then make up a company, and then just go and see what the process looks like in terms of being prospected, or experience what it's like to go through the sales process and be pitched on sales. Or let's say sit down with a customer if they have a customer experience issue, and then see what that experience looks like from that particular capacity. Those are some ways to really be able to kind of expand beyond your own view without really spending a lot of time getting out of your obviously primary job or primary role. And it'll be interesting because I think what you'll end up finding is you might actually find something interesting to do if you say in your next step of your career. Otherwise, as you continue to trek up onward and upward, you'll find that a lot of leaders are picked up and promoted because of the fact that they actually have a broader perspective and can empathize with other groups, that they can share a narrative, a collective story.
Yeah, I've heard, Sangram on Flip My Funnel talk with other marketing leaders about this. The journey to CMO is kind of this journey from specialist to generalist. And that's part of that journey, as you're alluding to there, Anand, is, having empathy and understanding. And you're not an expert in all of these other functional roles, but you know enough to be dangerous, for lack of a better term. It's the way I always put it. And I love what you're saying there about, seeing, obviously not spending too much of your time, but marketing's getting form fills with nothing companies and abc at gmail.com. So what's one more, and the intelligence that could be gained by that exercise. And then, the other thing is, earlier we talked about the democratization of data. The way I would put it, in what you mentioned there of, sitting in on those other strategy meetings with your functional leader, is kind of the democratization of the experience. You get this. There's no way to understand what it's like until you're there, and those meetings are where the rubber is meeting the road. That and putting yourself in the shoes of the customer, I think, are two very, very tactical things that a lot of people can do. And as you mentioned, if individuals out there listening to this have ambitions to grow into leadership roles, whether that's in marketing or other functional roles, those skills and that understanding and that empathy are all going to serve them well and serve their organizations well, which I think we're touching on a lot of things that are, both good for individuals and for companies in everything that you're sharing today, man. So
absolutely.
I loved it. As I mentioned at the top of the episode, every conversation I have with you, I feel like I walk away a little bit smarter, a little bit more challenged, have some creative ideas. So hopefully listeners feel the same way from this conversation today. If anybody wants to stay connected with you, if they aren't already, Anand, what's the best way for them to connect with you or stay in touch?
Yeah, just usual suspects. LinkedIn. Certainly go ahead and connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm not, I'm certainly not fearful, and I won't be all exclusive. And then follow me on Twitter. My name, same with LinkedIn. And of course, lately obviously with the acquisition of the company, there's not much of a company website. So you can follow me as I'm going to start to write a little bit more on AnandThaker.com, just my own blog and personal musings that are out there. And don't forget, if you're thinking just to be a CMO, you're not thinking big enough. You should be at the top of the food chain. And that's where marketing is going to be headed. Next generation marketers will be headed. So
I love it. Anand, this has been great, man. Thank you so much for joining me on the show today.
Thank you, Logan. It's been fantastic. And everything you said, likewise. I always enjoy our conversations.
We totally get it. We publish a ton of content on this podcast, and it can be a lot to keep up with. That's why we've started the B2B Growth Big Three, a no-fluff email that boils down our 3 biggest takeaways from an entire week of episodes. Sign up today at sweetfishmedia.com/big3. That's sweetfishmedia.com/big3.